Today on the Dream Big series, we've got Don Simon. Don Simon is an attorney, an educator, and an arts advocate. He also volunteers with Kansas City's Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants of Arts. Today, Don is going to talk about the importance of starting a music career right. He's going to speak about ASCAP, BMI, copywriting, performance royalties, and many other things. Also, Don talks about the importance of setting up a band's organizational structure correctly. In other words, who gets paid what. He's going to speak about music publishing and what it means, and how do you get paid if a song ends up on Netflix or a commercial or a video game or something similar to that. And lastly, he's going to give great advice on how to treat your music business like a music business. This is Chad Borkwin, and this is the Dream Big series. I am a professional musician and recording artist that has been fortunate enough to learn how to get paid doing what I love. But this didn't just happen for me. In fact, I have years of doing things other than music that have all played a part of the success I get to experience now. But more importantly, I've learned the value of having the right people speak into my life and how that is the key to breaking free of old limiting habits. So if you're tired of being stuck and you believe there is more for you in life, the good news is everything I've done is a result of what I've learned, and it can be taught. Join us as we bring topics and guests onto this show to provide you with valuable insights on how to get to your big dream. This is the Dream Big series. Welcome to the show. All right, welcome to the Dream Big series. This is Don Simon here today. Welcome to the show, Don.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chad.
Don, there's a lot of things that I definitely am excited for you to share from an attorney perspective, a music attorney's perspective for our independent artists. So it's going to be good. There's going to be a lot of cool advice that you have here. Can you give us a little background of your experiences and what you've done up to this point?
Sure.
Yeah.
For the last few years, I've done mainly business consultation with artists and media professionals. Before that, before I moved to Kansas City in 2009, I practiced entertainment law in Chicago for about 6 or 7 years. And then way before that, I worked in radio and television, played bass in bands. I had hair down to here, and now you can tell it's a little bit different. Not as much coverage as before. But I think that gives me a lot of good perspective for artists on some of the issues that they face, and business issues in addition to the legal ones. And so I go around talking to artists such as yourself, and speaking engagements, and serving on creative arts boards, and helping artists that way.
So speaking of issues, what are some of the issues that you see are pretty prevalent across the board?
Sure.
With musicians.
A lot of the artists that I've worked with over the years, I affectionately refer to them as nobodies, in that they're just starting out in their career.
Right.
And so a lot of it is educating them on some of the basic issues that they may encounter when it comes to entering the music industry, which in many regards is a lot like other industries. There are things to think about, business issues, LLCs, contracts. A lot of those things are similar across the board no matter what the industry is. But in this particular creative industry, you layer on top of that working with others and creativity and copyright issues. And so it's a lot of educating them on things about copyright, about music publishing, what an LLC is. And so that's where I sort of figure in with a lot of these artists' careers, is helping them start thinking about this venture as a business, as being an entrepreneur and all that comes along with that. And so it's a lot of basic issues like making sure that they're signed up with ASCAP or BMI, making sure that there's agreements between them and other people that they collaborate with. And so what I try to do is instill in them not only just entrepreneurship, but also this idea of trying to be proactive about things. Making these business decisions now, early on, business and legal decisions, now, early on, and then putting them aside and then focus on touring and writing songs and having a good time and hopefully making a little money at it while they're doing that, right? And so I try to get them to be more proactive about some of these issues.
As far as the, so you've mentioned a bunch of stuff right there.
Yeah. There's a lot in there.
So let's real quick. Tell me why do I need to be registered with ASCAP or
Sure. One of the first things that I talk about with songwriters is how to protect their songs. And this is something that could potentially be a significant revenue stream for them at some point. And so I talk about what that term music publishing means and how it's different than owning the recording of those songs. And so it's important to focus in because with limited exception, the songwriters always get paid. The performers of the songs or artists who might perform on the recording, not always. But with music publishing, the songwriter, and then by extension, if they affiliate with the music publishing company, always gets paid. And so we start there and kind of work our way out. And so a lot of times when I'm meeting with them, I'll talk about what that term publishing means and how it's different than ownership of the recording. And so we talk about how any given song you hear on the radio or any given sort of recording you hear on the radio, there's two copyrights at work. There's the one for the song written by the songwriter and owned by the songwriter, and then the recording of that song, which might be the same person as the songwriter or could be somebody totally different. And so we isolate that one copyright with the song and then talk about all the different publishing agreements that are out there and whether you can do it on your own or affiliate with a publishing company, whether they should do it, how they can start making money from that. And one of those is through performance royalties from ASCAP or BMI, how to affiliate with one of those. And I don't really have a preference on one performing rights society over the other. If you look at the artists who are affiliated with each one, I mean, there's a good stable of artists on all sides. So it's important to get listed with that. And initially when they're just starting out and playing a couple gigs, or maybe they've got one song spun on the radio a couple times, I wouldn't be waiting by the mailbox for a royalty check. But at some point, things might really kick in and you don't want to be scrambling to try to get all your songs listed on one of those organizations sort of after the fact while you're touring and trying to do all the other things. So it's really goes back to the idea of being proactive and trying to do some of this stuff now.
Okay, so I'm in a band. Let's say I'm in a band with one other. Well, let's say there's four guys. Okay. There's two of us that are co-writing the songs. Who all needs an ASCAP or a performing rights? Yeah.
And this is one of those things that. I talk. One of the reoccurring things I'll talk about is make these decisions now early on, as opposed to later on when there's a little bit of stress or strain in the relationship. It is very common in a band situation. Let's say there are four folks in the band. It's very common for one, maybe two people in that band to be the principal songwriter or songwriters, and the other two are just band members who help perform those songs. And so in those situations, you want to make it known right away who the songwriters are, who owns those songs, and the percentage of ownership, and then have those percentages reflected in band partnership agreements, how you list those songs on ASCAP or BMI, whichever one you've decided to affiliate with, and make it known that at some point there may be royalties come in that go to those songwriters that aren't going to flow to those non-songwriting members of the band. And so sometimes that it's not a big deal until money starts coming in, right? Yeah. And then it can be sort of contentious. And that's why it's important to make these decisions early on. Or, have some kind of formula. I know some bands that even though there may be one or two people that are principal songwriters, they go ahead and throw a little bit of the publishing royalties over to some of the other members as just kind of a way for everybody to succeed. But they work out a formula, they say, I'll get 20%, you get 20, and then they divide it up, some other way. There's lots of different ways to do it, just as long as each member of the band agrees to it.
Right.
But it can be very contentious, especially if it's a hit song and you see all this money flowing in, but it's only going to the songwriters and maybe a little bit to the people who recorded the song through sales of that recording. But it's important to have that discussion with your other members early on.
Yeah, and so based on that, I'm sure you've seen this because, I know you have. We've talked about this, but so you've got a lot of this that musicians will start with, and they're going to say, we are a band. We're going to split everything equal because we're a band.
Right.
Then you end up with, you end up with a really disproportionate amount of work being done by one or two of them.
Yeah.
And there's this, then you end up with a, just some feelings of like, I'm being taken advantage of because I'm doing all the work, but making, still splitting evenly. What have you seen with that?
And it's, it's easy to do because, you work with these people. You want it to be a good, open, creative environment. You don't want all these financial and interpersonal issues to interfere with that. You might have, these might be your buddies from high school, that you've known for a long time. You don't want to create an air of tension in that situation. But by not addressing it early on, it can still, it'll end up the same thing, a lot of tension and stuff. Plus, if it's a situation where maybe you have an opportunity to license a song to a movie or commercial and you wrote it, but yet these other folks have a say-so in whether it gets licensed or not, that can be quite contentious too, because there may be somebody who, doesn't want that song associated with a particular business or product or whatever, and they would have equal say-so to say no. And the end result would be maybe missing a licensing opportunity. And it's really easy to not address these things because you want to keep it friendly and everything. Yeah. And can I tell you a war story about one of these situations?
Yeah, for sure.
This is going back many years when I still practiced in Chicago. I had a client who had, many years before this, started a Beatles tribute band. And it was one of those bands that they do different eras of the Beatles. They put on wigs and they do the Mop Top era and the Sgt. Pepper era and everything like that. And these guys were doing like 150, 200 dates a year. They were making a lot of money with it. Who knew? Playing other people's songs would give you so much money, right? Mm-hmm. So see if I get this right. The Paul and the Ringo didn't get along with the George and the John because apparently there's as much internal strife within a Beatles tribute band as I guess there was with the actual Beatles. But so the George and the John wanted to go start their own Beatles tribute band because apparently there's a lot of money in it.
Right.
And they were wanting to leave the band and be bought out. Mm-hmm. And my client had been served a letter from their lawyer asking for $500,000, $250,000 apiece of their interest in this Beatles tribute band. Again, not even performing their own songs. The songs of they were that successful. And he called me up and he was like, his name actually was Paul, but it was a different last name, of course. And he called me up and he was like, hey, what can I do about this? And I asked him, I said, all right, we got to, do you have a band agreement in place how you divide up the assets? Well, no, we don't have. Did you start an LLC and have an operating agreement that would list out procedures for buyout? No, we didn't do that. And I was like, Paul, why didn't you have any of this stuff? Mm-hmm. And he was from Ohio, but he still spoke in this British accent for some reason. He was living the Paul McCartney lifestyle. And he was like, well, you just all you need is love and all. No, you need contracts. You need decisions made. You need, you gotta go through this stuff. And yeah, it's ick, but you deal with it and then you set it aside. And then hopefully if something, hopefully it doesn't have to deal with that kind of stuff. But if it does, then you've got a procedure for it. And so we settled them with a much lower rate than what they were asking for. But it could have been pretty nasty. Yeah. And so it was a situation where we dealt with that current problem. And now it's like, okay, Paul, from this day forward, make sure that you have some type of agreements in place or freelancers or however you want to set this business up and operate it like that. Because, he was just all about the, playing the 60s music and living in love and all that kind of stuff. But it was a cold, hard reality for him for sure.
Yeah. And
he's still out there doing it, luckily. That didn't stop him, but it was definitely a lesson for him.
All right, Don, let's take just a moment if you're all right. We're gonna go to commercial on a free ebook that we've got to help artists just learn the business of music. The music industry is drastically changing and for the better. The power to have a successful music career is in your hands and no longer up to a few gatekeepers. The key is having the right information, the right tools, and committing to do the work. I want to help you jumpstart your career with my free ebook called Play Music, Make More. This free ebook is everything we've done with our own group, as well as what I've learned being an entertainment agent, and it's all played into the success we've had as independent artists. Visit playmusicmakemore.com to get your free copy today. All right, Don, so this has been really, really good at this point about reasons to pay attention to this on the front end. And I can get on a soapbox about that too, because I've been so much on the of what happens if you don't do that.
Yeah.
And it's so much harder to deal with it on the back end than it is to just have everything clear up front. Let's talk a little bit, because there's a massive shift that started happening with music licensing, with all this Netflix movies and Hulu and all this new content out there that is opening up all kinds of opportunity for musicians that are not at this like elite national level, because they don't want to pay the fee to have them put the song on there.
Yeah.
So what are some of the nuts and bolts of that thing? How do you get paid on that? How do you let's just get into it.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, with all this explosion of streaming services and original content, the need for good music is it's greater now more than ever. And so for artists that are seeking out licensing situations, you want to kind of keep a few things in mind. You want to keep in mind that you have your songs copyrighted, both the song side and also the recording. And I mean copyrighted meaning that you've registered the copyright with the Copyright Office, so that you have those taken care of. That you also, as a songwriter, have those songs that you're seeking licensing opportunities for, to have your songs registered with ASCAP and BMI, so that if they are performed through some streaming service, you get those royalties. Also, in those recordings that you might seek out licensing situations for, the original recordings, that everyone that had anything to do with those recordings, even session musicians, producers, somebody came in and played a cowbell, whatever, all of those performances have and those tasks have been licensed, or you've gotten the rights for. So if you've worked with a producer, make sure that the producer, you have some deal with them where they get royalties or whatever they got paid. The session musicians, their performances are all owned by you or the band, so you own everything.
Even the guy that, the guy that masters it.
Yeah, anybody who touched the song side or the recording side, you want to make sure that either their rights have been assigned over to you, or you've worked out some deal with them. Because if you go to some of these websites like Hollywood Reporter or places that kind of discuss litigation that's brewing out there, there's always somebody who, whenever a song hits big, they come out of the woodwork going, well, I contributed one line in the chorus or whatever, and they're asking for $23 million, right? Nobody cares until the money starts being made. So even though maybe you're not going to make $23 million on the song, you want to make sure that stuff's taken care of. Also, too, if you've taken care of all those different rights out there and people that have touched it, producers, session musicians, it makes it more attractive to a Netflix TV show or whatever. Because if your rights to the recording and the song is kind of murky, they're not going to want to deal with it. Because in the event of a lawsuit, if I'm the guy who says, hey, I produced that track, you didn't work anything out with me, I'm not only going to sue you as the band, but I'm also going to sue Netflix, because guess who has more money?
Right.
Netflix. And Netflix is going to be like, we're out.
Yeah.
And so in order to try to avoid that, you want to make sure that you get all the rights and get your house, your affairs in order first. So do that. And then also you might want to think about pairing up with different reps who have established relationships with these television shows and movie studios, who they get hired to find licensing opportunities for your recordings and songs. Sometimes the publishing companies do that, which is part of their job, is to find licensing opportunities for you. But then there are also people who make their living out of pitching songs to TV shows and then getting a cut of whatever they bring in. So in those kind of situations, you want to be careful about, if it's an exclusive deal or whatever, and everything's going to be a kind of a case-by-case basis on that. But it can be pretty lucrative if you hit on an opportunity. I know that there's been some local Kansas City artists that have done all right. One in particular, she got a song placed in the TV show Private Practice, which was a spinoff of Grey's Anatomy. I didn't watch any of them, so I don't even know if it's still on, but it was placed in there, and I think only just for maybe like a few seconds, and it was enough money for her to move to Ireland and just live on songs for a while.
That's not bad.
It was nice.
Yeah.
And then we also had another band that had a song placed in a Pepsi commercial that ran during the one of the Super Bowls maybe a year or so ago. So it's happening.
Yeah.
And it's not just bands that are in LA and New York and Nashville that are getting it. It's places like here in the Kansas City area. So the opportunities are there. It's something that you have to work for and have other people working on your behalf and make sure that your affairs are in order so that when the opportunity comes, you can really jump on it, because these companies want a decision right away. And if not, they got 200 other songs that they could use at their disposal. So those have been new and interesting ways for people to get more music. And as you mentioned earlier, there's a lot more opportunities now with these streaming services coming up with their own original programming. And then still just movies and TV shows that are always looking for new songs, or even television commercials. I mean, there have been several hit songs that have come out of TV commercials. Like they were originally in a TV commercial and then became a hit. So you just never know, and you want to make yourself open and available if the opportunity presents itself.
The reps that are repping these songs, I mean, is it a 50-50 if they place them, or how does that usually work?
It kind of depends. And I say it depends, which I know is like the worst answer a lawyer can give. Right. But it really does depend. Yeah. It depends on as the songwriter, your ability to be able to negotiate. Maybe if you have a little bit more standing, maybe if you have a little bit more negotiating pull, you can say, well... Yeah. Maybe 60-40 or whatever. But you don't want to be too lopsided with it, because you want this person to work on your behalf. Right? And you want it to make it, you want it to be worth their while. And so they're not going to go with just, 10% or whatever. But you want to make it worth their while, and to be able to open up their book of contacts and say, hey, I've got this really great song. I think I heard you're working on this production, this biopic, whatever. Yeah. I think it'd be a good bar scene song or something like that. And I think there's something to be said too for listing with lots of different agencies, and sort of through that, they're going to have lots of different contacts. So I'd be leery of exclusive deals, but also sometimes exclusive deals can be good if the person has a big book of contacts in the industry where they can maybe get your song placed. So there's lots of different deal points to think about. But also you just want to think about what your goal is. Is this something like, I'm a songwriter and I want to write songs just to be placed into a movie, or if I got this band and we're touring and hey, if this song placement happens, hey, that's nice. You got to think about it in terms of how does this fit into your business, just as part of your business plan.
Well, and that's a great segue to talk a little bit more about entrepreneurship.
Sure.
The one thing that Brett and I have we've always done is, how do we maintain a forward trajectory of music, and how you don't do that is trading time for dollars on something that's not connected at all. Yeah. So we've always been open to what are those, what are those methods, and how can we do that? What's some advice you'd have if you want to, okay, so I'm a musician, I want to write, I want to do that, but I need to treat this like a business. So,
oh gosh, that's the difficult part of some of this legal issues and business stuff. Is it can take away from the creativity, the time you devote to playing and singing and writing songs and whatnot. So you have to kind of, I think, strike a balance. In many ways, you don't necessarily have to do this all yourself. You can hire what would be sort of your board of advisors to help you on some of these things, an accountant, a lawyer, a manager, who can take some of these tasks from you and free you up then to do what you do best, which is touring and singing and playing and writing songs and things like that. But you still want to make sure that they're done, even if you outsource these tasks to a business manager or whatever. You still want to make sure that they're taken care of, because at the end of the day, this is your business, this is your venture, and you want it to be successful. You can't just sort of abdicate those things to somebody else, like, oh, he's taking care of it or whatever. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think my advice is educate yourself on these issues. There's some really great resources out there. Billboard magazine has lots of good information. There's the time-honored book by Donald Passman, Everything You Need to Know About the Music Industry, which is written in great plain language by a well-established LA lawyer who talks about what a talent agent does, what a booking agent should do, how do you figure out the fuzzy math in a recording contract. I think the best thing that they can do is educate themselves on many of these issues and not steer away from it or avoid them. And I get why you want to avoid them, because they're not exactly the most exciting thing, right? Mm-hmm. You just want to create songs, and the intersection of business and creativity can be a very uncomfortable area for a lot of artists. Mm-hmm. But if they have any hope of making any money at doing what they do, doing what they love, they got to start thinking about entrepreneurship and how do I sell this product and earn a living with it. Here's my checklist of things. I need to get an accountant. I need to have good contracts. I need to make sure the guy who played cowbell on my song, we get his rights to his performance. Mm-hmm. It all really just becomes a checklist, not any different than making sure that you have good strings on your guitar and that you got new tubes in your amp, or whatever it is that's part of your kind of daily checklist. Just put these things in there too, and deal with them, make the decisions, set them aside, and then play your music and maybe make some money at it while you're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. If if somebody wants to get a hold of you to help with either consulting or maybe legal advice, and what's their steps with that?
Okay, the first thing I would recommend is a local organization here in Kansas City that I serve on the board of directors of. And it's called the Kansas City Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts. And if you're listening to this or watching this and you're not in the Kansas City area, a lot of bigger cities have similar organizations, like St. Louis has one, Chicago has Lawyers for the Creative Arts. These are organizations that help with artists. If they meet certain income guidelines from their art, they can help them with a contract review or a legal issue. They also put on many programs, conferences on some of these legal issues. Mm-hmm. So I would first start with one of those organizations. And so if you're in the Kansas City area, you can go to kcvlaa.org.
Okay.
I know it's a lot of...
Yeah, we'll put that in the notes too.
Sure. And I think that would be a good place to start. I'm on the board of directors. You might meet me through that way. We put on programs throughout the year, not just focused on musicians, other things too. But there's also another organization that puts on a program called Mixmaster. Originally started in Lawrence and it kind of has made its way over here, but they also put on programs that involve legal issues, promotion, how to get your song on the radio. So there's a lot of resources out there. But of course, if people want to talk to me directly, I'm always good to go have a coffee or whatever. And, and you can put that information up on the screen, my email address and whatever. But I'm always happy to talk to people. It's interesting to me. It's fun. I consider myself to be an arts advocate. Mm-hmm. And so I would rather have a coffee with somebody and talk to them about some issue, get it resolved, hopefully, and then they can move on, as opposed to not getting it resolved, and then it might become a much, much larger issue if they're not careful.
Yeah. All right. So last question.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. And this, a lot of this has been really nuts and bolts and absolutely necessary. So what I want to ask you though is, and this will be interesting, because I want to know, you're obviously passionate about what you're doing here. Yeah. And what advice, though, from when you were 16 to now, a lot's happened.
Oh, my goodness.
So what advice would you give to the 16-year-old Don Simon, knowing what you know today?
Appreciate your hair while you still have it.
Yeah.
But, apart from that, I think I would fall back to the educating yourself on some of these issues. There's so many more resources available to artists out there than there was even when I was 16. I mean, people wrote books and stuff like that, but you can find a lot of good information on the web. But just talk to other artists, talk to people that have been doing it 10, 20 years or whatever, who can give you a little bit of sort of a historical perspective, but it can also, say, hey, you should avoid this, do this now, whatever, because 9 times out of 10, they have experienced what you might be experiencing now. And they can really give you a good perspective. It's one thing for me as a lawyer to say, well, get the contracts and do the whereases and heretofores and all that kind of stuff. But, that's sort of a theoretical approach to it. Whereas somebody who is out there touring and playing music every night, doing what you want to do, that perspective is invaluable. So I would say educate, and also, I guess for lack of a better term, get a mentor.
Right.
I think that would be some good advice for some folks who are just starting out.
It's good. Don, thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, this has been great, man.
Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Have me back again. We can talk about protecting your band's name through trademark. We can talk about contracts. We got other stuff to talk about. LLCs.
We'll do it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You've been listening to the Dream Big series with Don Simon. For more information on the Kansas City Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts, please visit their website at kcvlaa.org. We will also have that link for you in the show notes. You've been listening to the Dream Big series. We would love to hear from you, so please leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to visit us at dreambigseries.com for more podcast videos and blogs. Also, let us know if you would like to bring the Dream Big series event to your school, corporation, or organization. Thank you for listening to the Dream Big series.